Miss Sue.
Thank you, Bailey. We are so grateful for the Alexander Hamilton Memorial Free Library, who helps us to sponsor this program so that we can offer it for free for everyone who wants to learn to cook. We are a nonprofit organization, and we also have several other sponsors that allow us to buy our food and get our aprons for the children, things like that. We have the Beveled Edge up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. They actually did this gorgeous countertop in this kitchen that we're in. Patriot Federal Credit Union, a longtime credit union since 1963 in our town and in Chambersburg area. And then Seniors Cookies, which is our cool cookie guy in Hagerstown. Hey, Bailey, how were those cookies you got from Seniors Cookies?
Those cookies were amazing. They didn't last very long in my household, but they were so good. So thank you to Seniors Cookies for, he made a special trip to where I was staying at the time. So I really appreciated that.
Just the nicest fellow, and very much a servant to people and children and youth, and sponsors our program as well. So I'm glad you know the cookies were good. Good for you. So with that, we have Renfrew Museum, an icon in our town in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. There's a beautiful story there about Renfrew and how it became really an asset of the town, which we'll talk about in another day. But in the meantime, what they're doing at Renfrew is they are reenacting hearth cooking from 1820, and Miss Becky and Mr. Steve at Renfrew have done a video for us so that they could craft it, and they're making an asparagus pie. After that, we're going to talk real quick about how we would make that same thing in the modern kitchen, and then talk about a version for today's activity level, which is very different. We need to watch our fat and sugar and salt. Back in the 1820s, they worked the farm. They were out working and it was physical. Now we sit on computers. So we need to cut back on our fat and sugar and our salt, and we'll talk about a little low-cal recipe. So the asparagus pie they're making, that would be an anytime food. At Suechefs, we talk about two kinds of foods. We talk about sometimes foods, which are foods that are desserts and treats and things that we have now and then, fast food now and then. And then there is anytime food, and that would be what we're making today because it's rich with eggs and wonderful desserts. Oh, look, Bailey, tell me what you have.
Oh, this was given to me by Karen Sourbeer. She's our adult services specialist. But this is just it's from choosemyplate.gov about what your plate should look like. So you have some fruits, some bananas and apples. It looks like blueberries. Then you have your grains. So that's rice, breads, and then obviously we need our vegetables and our protein, so like eggs, fish, turkey, and steak. So I just have this laying around in my office, so I wanted to hold that up.
Thanks for sharing that. And yes, the protein in this dish that they're making, even in the 1820s, was eggs. The vegetables is asparagus. And back then, they didn't have access to foods like we do now. You cooked with what was growing on the land you lived on. You didn't go to Martin's and get bok choy and peppers and chicken. You know, you had to work with what you had on the land. And also they didn't have modern ovens like we do. So it's really a challenge. Think about when you go to camp and you're cooking at camp on an open fire. It's very similar. So give them that, and we are so honored to have Renfrew be our guest sous chef this month. So I think Bailey is going to take us back in time and play this video. I'm going to grab a chair and take some notes.
All right, 1 second.
Okay, that was 5 minutes. We did good. Can you see me on the screen?
The summer kitchen, as the name implies, was a building adjacent to the main portion of the house that the family would have come out to prepare their meals during the warm season.
On our table, you'll see some ingredients that are available to farm families like the Royers and the Fonestocks, the people who lived here in the early 19th century. You'll see fresh eggs. At this point in time of the season, the chickens are laying tons and tons of eggs. And so you see a lot of recipes for springtime that incorporate eggs. We also have asparagus, this green stuff right here. And it's one of the first vegetables that are coming up in the spring. You'll want to pick your asparagus when it's very tender. When it starts to get a little bit fat like this, it's going to eventually start to become tough and woody. So the thinner the asparagus, the better. This is a perfect size, but it'll still taste good if it's a little bit thick like this. We also have fresh cow's milk on our table. Dairy is something that farm families like the Royers would be using regularly. We have butter here that would have been churned by hand. Our other ingredients include flour. The Royer family had a mill on their property back during the 19th century, and they would have been grinding grain into flour. We also have some seasonings, salt and pepper, and those are your simple ingredients for an asparagus pie. You'll see the other tools on my table that we're going to use today are some mixing bowls, a redware mixing bowl and spoon, one to mix up our egg mixture, the other for our pie crust. We have a baking vessel. We're going to be baking directly in a small Dutch oven today, but you can use also a pie pan, and at this point in time you can put that vessel inside a larger Dutch oven or in your bake oven, but we're going to put the crust directly onto the cast iron. It gives it a really nice taste. And then the other two tools I'm going to be using today are a wooden board for rolling out my pie crust, and a wooden rolling pin. We're going to prepare our pie crust first. The first thing that we're going to use is a cup. So standardized measuring doesn't come into play in the United States until the late 19th century. During the time period we're representing, which is about 1820, farm wives like Catherine Royer and her daughters, they would have been using a cup from their shelf, and this would be their unit of measure. So we're going to take a cup and fill it with flour. You're going to need to start with about 1 cup, and then we'll add more flour if we need to. So we'll just fill up our vessel here. It's just a loose fill. You're not packing very tightly. Next, what we're going to need is some butter, and we're going to probably use about a tablespoon. Again, the tablespoon is a standard unit of measure, does not exist at this point in time, so this would be whatever you use as your tablespoon. In this case, I have a horn spoon, and we're going to use about the size of that. So butter is used. Also, families might have used lard, which is fat from pigs. Lard makes a nice fluffy pastry crust. We're going to need 2 knives. So I have 1 knife here. I'm going to grab another knife from my cutlery tray. And this is a technique called cutting in. So we're going to take our knife and we're going to move along the butter and cut it into the flour. You're just going to keep working at it. Your butter, you want it to be slightly chilled so that it's firm. And we're just going to keep working at this using a cutting motion until we get tiny little pieces about the size of a pea. I've combined my butter with the flour using the cutting in technique, and you can see that I have just little tiny pieces of whatever fat we're using, and we used butter. You could also use lard, vegetable shortening also, but they're just about the size of a pea. Some of them are a little bit bigger. But what we're going to do next is add a little bit of water, just little by little, to moisten our dough. So I'll just put in a little bit at first. And then I'm going to combine it using my spoon. Mix that in. And if you need a little bit more water, you can drizzle some more in. You don't have to use a pitcher. You can also use a spoon to just add it in little by little. You don't want it too moist. You don't want it too dry. The idea is for it to start to bind together, and it's starting to come together. I might need just a little bit more moisture. I'm going to test it with my fingers here, see if it binds, and there we go. It's starting to come together into a ball of dough. So I'm picking it up out of my bowl, and I'm putting it back in, adding some more flour to the mix. We don't want to touch the pie crust too much, but to combine it together,
Sorry.
we're not kneading it like a bread dough, we're just combining it. And this may even need just a little bit more moisture here. Just enough to get all those pieces to stick to the dough ball. All right, our next step is to grease our baking dish. So we want to take a little bit of butter, just a chunk, and we're going to rub it into whatever we're using to bake in. You can also grease using a cooking spray if you have a modern cooking spray, but greasing it by hand works really well too. Just want to cover the whole thing with your grease so that our crust doesn't stick, and it's easy when you're serving to get it out. All right, I'm going to show you a trick on how to get the pastry crust onto your baking dish. So you're going to start at the edge of your crust. We have a well-floured rolling pin, and we're just going to roll it onto our rolling pin. Oh, I'm a little sticky. And then we're going to very carefully lay it over top, and we're going to work it onto our baking vessel. See, I've cooked a lot too, and it's not perfect every time. We're going to kind of try to lay that in there, and then we're going to piece it back together and make sure that we've covered the whole bottom. And then we're going to push it on the sides. Sometimes you might need to use your knife and cut off a little bit and kind of piece it together. And we just want to work it up the side of our baking dish so that we have a nice crust for our egg mixture to the inside. This is going to be a fairly deep pie, and during this time period, pies are pretty deep. You might have heard of meat pies. It's okay to have a really high side on your pie, but if you're using a modern baking dish, it's pretty standardized, so it might be more shallow. There's really no rhyme or reason to your pie crust. You can make it however you want. It'll taste good just the same. And I'm just kind of fitting it on here, making sure that we've got nice high sides so that my egg mixture doesn't overflow. To prepare your asparagus, you're going to need to cut off the ends. So this is where the asparagus was broken off from the plant. And over time, it'll dry out and it'll become woody, and that's not very tasty. So you can either break it off by hand, like this, or you can use a knife very carefully to cut off the woody end. So we're going to do that for each piece of asparagus. So now that we have all of the ends cut off of our asparagus, we're going to chop our asparagus into little pieces. And that helps the pieces boil quicker. You can also steam the asparagus whole and then cut it up after the fact. But what I'm going to do is just cut our pieces up, and then we're going to boil them in some water. And you want your pieces to be probably about 1 inch to 2 inches long.
Now that Becky has prepared the asparagus, we're going to put it on the fire. And how we're going to do that is we're going to bring our crane, and we're going to pull that out, and we have our hanging skillet in place. We're going to add the asparagus to the skillet. And we're going to cover the asparagus with some fresh water. The heat from the fire and the water combined will add steam, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to steam the asparagus.
It's beautiful. That's a great image.
So you'll know when your asparagus is ready when you can poke it with a fork and it's tender. So let's try and see what ours looks like. Looks done to me. So now what we'll do is we'll grab a slotted spoon and transfer our asparagus into our serving bowl.
While we wait for our asparagus to cool on the side, we're going to prepare our egg mixture. The asparagus doesn't have to be very cool when it goes in, but you don't want it so hot that it'll cook the eggs before you put it in the oven. So for a pie about the size that we're making today, we recommend 4 to 6 eggs. So I'm going to crack the eggs into this bowl. I'm going to grab myself a bowl to put the shells in. Eggshells are also good for compost, so if you compost at home, make sure you hang on to those. So go ahead and crack them into our bowl. I'm going to start with 4 eggs, see if I need more. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of milk and just pour it into the egg mixture, probably about 1/4 cup. And then I'm going to mix up my eggs and the milk, and you can use a wire whisk, you can use a spoon, you can use a fork, anything you need to use to get everything combined together. Now looking at my crust, I think I might go ahead and do the 6 eggs. So I'm going to add in 2 more eggs. Okay, so we're going to mix this together, and then we want to season to taste. So that means whatever you like. If you like a little bit of pepper, if you like a little bit of salt, if you have a little onion powder, garlic powder, fresh chives, anything you want to. So I'm just going to double check and see. This is our salt, so I'm just going to put a little bit of salt in here. And this is my pepper. Sprinkle a little bit of pepper. And then we will mix everything up. Next, we're going to take our cooked asparagus. It's cooled down a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and combine that with our eggs. And mix it together. Then we're going to head over to our pie crust, and very carefully, we're going to pour our whole egg mixture into the crust. Making sure that we get to the top, but we don't overflow. I think I estimated just right. All right. All right, so we're ready to go ahead and put this on the fire.
So now we'll want to cover our vessel and we'll bring it over to the fire. We first need to get our coals nice and spread out so that we can have a nice bed of even heat on the bottom of our vessel, and then we're going to cover with coals on top of our vessel. And that will be like a convection oven at your home.
Did you put that person on the fire?
I'll take my shovel, scoop some hot coals, and put them all around the top of the lid.
It's awesome.
And again, we have heat on the bottom of the vessel and heat from the top of the vessel. And it's going to cause to have a baking of it inside the Dutch oven itself, just like you would have in your oven at home. And we'll wait and see how long this will take to cook.
While our asparagus pie is baking, we wanted to introduce you to a spring vegetable that we have here growing at Renfrew that is a favorite among Pennsylvania German people. This is called rhubarb. It looks like a big, leafy, giant plant, but what we're really interested in is the stalks. So rhubarb shoots up from the ground and it creates all these stalks with big, broad leaves that shelter the plant. We don't want to eat the leaves, those are poisonous, but the stalks are good to eat. So what we do to harvest rhubarb is we just break it off and we take off the leaf and then we use the stalk. It's very sour, it's kind of refreshing, but it almost looks like celery. But when you taste it, it's very, very sour. So a lot of times people will cook it with sugar or other sweeteners and make it into jellies or pies. And it's a really great early spring crop. And we like to use it here at Renfrew. Hope you'll try it sometime.
So our asparagus pie has been cooking for about 20 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and check it to see if it's ready to take it off the fire. So we're going to open it up, we'll take our knife, and we'll put it inside and see when it comes out. If it's clean, we know that it's done. Looks perfect to me. So we're going to go ahead and take it off the fire, and then we'll plate it.
We've now allowed our asparagus pie to cool for about 10 minutes, and boy doesn't it look good. Come on and take a look. Our crust is nice and golden brown, our egg has cooked through, and we're ready to eat.
I'm trying so tight.
So here we have our delicious asparagus pie. It's the perfect dish for early spring. Eggs, asparagus, milk, all the types of things that farm families would have had right at the start of the growing season. What do you think, Steve?
Looks great to me. Let's dig in.
I love this. That's awesome. What'd you think, Bailey?
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that when they were cooking that you're supposed to put your coal on top of whatever pot you had, I guess to make it cook faster. Because boy, it could take like up to hours to cook. So wow, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't either. And it kind of makes it, like they said, like a convection oven with the coals on the top and the bottom. I also liked how they referenced, when they kept referencing back and saying in a modern kitchen, you know, you would do this, like a convection oven. And you can use different spices just like we have today, like garlic and salt and peppers. Like they kept bringing it back towards the modern kitchen. Now, of course, we have so many wonderful conveniences they didn't have then, and a variety of foods available at any time. The pie crust that she made was gorgeous, and that is an art. My grandmother used to make this pie crust that was to die for. You probably had people like that in your family.
Not really, but I'm not a big pie person.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to share really quick pieless crust that I made using the similar ingredients, because today wheat aren't as active as they are years ago. And so Jessica and I are on health journeys, and there is a lot of childhood obesity. So we want to cut back on that when we can. So modeling their recipe, I used egg whites instead of eggs. I used a variety of different vegetables. Some kiddos don't like asparagus. I used spinach and red peppers, beautiful red peppers. And bok choy is a lovely vegetable. It's like a celery. So when you see that at Walmart, you can pick that up. And I used low-fat milk. And then there's no crust on this at all. I didn't make a crust, but you can't even tell. Yeah. So I'm going to cut a little piece of that for me and Jessica while we wrap up. And then one more thing I wanted to say was, when in the modern world, we're going to learn to make pie crust at Suechefs one day. That is something that we do together to learn that skill, because it's one of those, you got to eyeball it and figure it out kind of things. So we're going to do that. But in the meantime, if you don't want to do that, you can go to the grocery store and get frozen pie crust. They're a couple dollars. They're like $1 a piece by the time you get done. All you have to do is par bake it, which is a fancy name for baking it for 20 minutes or so before on its own, before you put any custard in. And that is a simple and fun thing to do. I'm just going to show you real quick. You take your pie crust, you line it with foil, and then this is really fun, kids. You get pennies. And the double foil protects the pennies from touching because of germs. And you throw them pennies in there, which is really, really fun. So you can ask your parents and all of your people in your family, your adults, for their pennies. And what the pennies do is they make the heat even, distributed, and then the foil hanging over keeps the pie crust from burning. And when you par bake it, it keeps it from bubbling up in the middle or getting all goofy on you and breaking. And you can just throw that in the oven. And through the magic of Zoomavision, here's one already baked.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So when it's done, you just take it out, pick up the foil like this, let your pennies cool, and you end up with a beautiful pie crust ready for your egg mixture and your vegetables. So there's a quick tip to get us going on if you want a pie crust. If you don't want a pie crust, you can do the eggless one or the crustless one, which I made today. Same recipe, just no crust. All you have to do is really grease your pan to make sure that you don't have it stick to your pan. I don't know if I can get my camera girl Jessica to taste this or not. What do you think?
I'll give it a shot.
All right, she's saying yes. Billy, it's unfair that you don't get a bite.
No, I'm really jealous.
All right, and this isn't This is a low-fat, high-protein food.
My mouth is watering. Oh,
What do you think?
It's good.
She said it's good. I think it's wonderful. We'll make this and have this for lunch one day together, Bailey, okay?
yes, please.
That's it for our program. I want to thank Renfrew. That was wonderful to
Yes.
have them represented. I thank Jessica, my daughter, for helping me with the camera today, and Bailey, always you there for us. We just really, really appreciate you. And the Alexander Hamilton Memorial Free Library. Our hope is to be physically at the library late summer, fall, so that we can have cooking classes in person with kiddos. We're going to see how COVID goes and how things happen. I also want to wrap up by thanking the Beveled Edge, our sponsor in Gettysburg, Patriot Federal Credit Union, of course, and Seniors Cookies. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in June on the 17th. We always meet on the third Thursday. So wrap us up, Bailey.
Yes, thank you again to Renfrew for providing such a wonderful and informative video about cooking back in the day. Thank you to Miss Sue and the sponsors of the Suechefs. Again, we will see everyone June 17th, and we're looking forward to hopefully meeting in person for Suechefs sometime in the future. And also an exciting announcement, well, two exciting announcements. The library is extending its hours to 11 p.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and then 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Fridays, and Saturdays will be open from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So we will be able to see a lot more people during the day. I'm so excited. And for our next announcement is that Sue and I are possibly planning a Suechefs bake sale for a market day in the summer. So we are very excited to be working on that, and hopefully we'll have more details in the future. But
That's exciting.
yes, I don't think I have anything else, so I will see everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey.
Thank you, Jessica. Bye.
Just say bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye.